And he describes to me the event of the previous night, the night before. So he says that he's a very strong person, but he says that this being inside one place is really, really, really getting to him now.
Mm.
And during the night, he stays awake. He tries to sleep, but he cannot. But what he told me was a very strange experience, not a very new kind of experience, not something very new, but something that he realized, and I realized too. Like the morning after, he said that I kept waking the whole night, and I was feeling really, really down. I was not feeling well at all, and I had these thoughts, these ideations that don't want to talk about. I asked what happened then. He said nothing. Morning happened,
Mm.
and this cerebrum, this human cerebrum, it's so primitive even now that we still associate sorrow with darkness
Hmm.
and light with joy. So something happened. The moment I was able to see the light in the sky, I hear the chirping of the birds on my window. Some transformation came. I don't know. I suddenly felt good and I was able to go to sleep. So, like, I have experienced the same thing sitting here in this apartment,
Mm.
like, multiple times. So, yeah, and as Tommy said, these are patterns that repeat interculturally in like writings and songs and poems and everything, because that is supposed to happen. Because like what we are facing, even if in isolation, we are facing it together as one race, right? To each their own miseries, but somewhere we are feeling the same things. We are feeling the same fears, the apprehensions, the hopes, and everything. So, and coming back to Nico's words, it's nothing like short of a war. And I do hope that we come out victorious on the other end when this is over.
But this is an interior war as well, and
Yeah,
that's
it
really
is,
interesting.
of course.
Yeah.
Amazing.
No,
I have so
it was
much I
very
could
powerful.
say.
Yeah.
I like, we have to
Yeah.
talk more about this afterwards, but
Yeah, we'll
Sure.
yeah we'll
but
have
Nico,
different.
did you prepare a poem for us as well?
Oh,
Yes.
sure. Yeah, I did. So if it's really short, but today, at the moment where everybody in France is coming back to a really dark kind of poetry, I just wanted to read you a few lines from Arthur Rimbaud, who is a genius of poetry from the 19th century. Just you might know a bit about him, guys, but just so you know, he wrote all his poetry between 14 years old and 20 years old. At
Wow.
20 years old, he stopped writing, and in 6 years, he actually had changed poetry forever.
Wow.
So today, he was really an extremely kind of early genius, and he died very early. He died at 37 in the town of the south of France after quitting poetry to travel the world, and he became a kind of adventurer in some way, but a dark adventurer in some way, and he didn't end very bad. But today I want to read a very short poem of his. It's not very famous. To tell you about this poem first, I must ask you: do you know what is an alma? It's Almah. I
Like,
just discovered the word.
Is it the soul? Maybe I don't know.
No, so Alma is the English translation of Alme, and it's actually an Oriental pattern. It's a word meant for ancient Egypt dancers, okay? And the poem I want to read is
Okay.
called Est-elle Alme in French, which is she an Alma? Okay, it's a question.
Right.
First of all, I'm going to do like Utsab. I'm going to read you the French version and then a translation I came up with
Yes,
so
by
you
all
can
means,
get.
of course.
So if that's okay with you, I'm going to do like that. And
Sure, of course, of course. Go ahead.
sounds good. Est-elle Alme? Est-elle Alme? Aux premières heures bleues, se détruira-t-elle comme les fleurs feu, devant la splendide étendue où l'on sente souffler la ville énormément florissante? C'est trop beau, mais c'est nécessaire. Pour la pêcheuse et la chanson du corsaire, et aussi puisque les derniers masques crurent encore aux fêtes de nuit sur la mer pure. So that's the whole poem. It's very short. I'm going to read you the translation.
please.
Is she an alma? Is she an alma? And with the first blue hours, will she perish like late flowers, facing the splendid vastness where one may feel the breath of a city that's blooming still? It is too good. It is too good, but necessary. For the fisher and the corsair's song, for the last of masqueraders gone, daydreaming still of nightly feasts on the pure sea. Arthur Rimbaud et El Almé. So I really love this poem because it brings you back to a time suspended in between times. There's really no era associated to it. To me, it transports me to my favorite town in the world, which is Venice, because he mentioned masqueraders at the end and the town floating on the water. So that's my personal interpretation, but it really brings me back there. And there is also, and it's really interesting because we come back to Utsab's poem as well, because it's also a time of transition between night and early morning, because we see the last masqueraders leave. We can see that obviously the poet is among them, is of course is part of this kind of party that's ending in some way. And that's thing that's really interesting, that Rimbaud wrote that among one of the last poems he just wrote before he quitted this artistic life forever. And that's a kind of moment of peace in an ocean of kind of troubles. And he was really a worried person, I think. Two things Rimbaud was fearing was love and boredom. And at this time of his life,
Amazing.
I think,
At 14, yeah.
at 14th, he was writing stuff like, yeah, that nobody could even come up with at 40. So
His mind
I
was
think-
really advanced for his years.
I have a question, Nico. Like in French, would you say it also displays like, because I felt like a sense of longing in the poem in English. Would you say that that is also portrayed in the French translation?
it's very, yeah, totally. I can feel it. It's really mysterious because Rimbaud, in some way, even when he's longing, he doesn't give up too much. It's a poet that doesn't really do sentimental things. He has one of the most beautiful ways of expressing love that I know, but he's really is never really kind of longing in some way.
Yeah, but I think, well, at least like for me, like that, like the party is over and thinking of the dinner that was like, or the feast that had happened, like that, those like, he's talking about like what had already happened. And in my head, like with those things came this sense of longing. Like he didn't say that wasn't explicitly stated in the poem, but like,
Totally. Totally. It's really hard to interpret Rimbaud, and that's also why I love him, because you can put everything you want in there, really, and it just becomes part of your life. So that's why it's a poet that's really
good.
It's really awesome to
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy that
Thank you.
I'm happy that you could enjoy it a bit. So yeah, that was my poem, and now we can shift on the last section for today, the last talking section, which will be a bit of a summary of what were our good surprises here, good things that happened in our life here as foreigners. And Kimberly, maybe you can also tell us about good surprises that you had because you stayed in Europe at some point of your life. So
no,
maybe
you guys are going to share this time, but welcome to Culture Shock.
Welcome to Culture Shock, exactly. Yeah,
Cultural shock.
I'm looking at the clock, and so we're gonna, we're just gonna exchange quickly about that.
Cool. So what I want to hear from you guys, actually, I'll just sit out on this one. It's no big deal. What are your like fondest memory, or what things surprise you most in a positive way about your time here?
So first, our guest has to intervene about that.
Yeah.
What something that you will remember in a positive way despite 2020 here in New York City?
Okay. It's something very simple actually. So like I'm an Indian and I'm not too accustomed to be very nice to strangers on the streets, maybe like in public places and everything. I come to America and then every stranger is smiling at you. I mean, how positive is that? The person who is coming across does not matter to you. You don't have to say hello. You don't have to give him or her a smile. But I realized coming after here, saying sorry, saying please, doing these nice things, these little gestures, they actually help in brightening up the day of both the people who take part in such an encounter. And nowadays I'm teased by my friends from India because Like in two sentences, I say probably 20 like sorries or excuse me or whatever. So that kind of stuff. But this is something that surprised me. It was very heartening, and this is perhaps the most basic lesson that I learned from my visit to the US. Be nice to people because I'm not so nice. And sorry.
I would have never guessed that you aren't nice from how you went here.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was my cultural, okay,
Awesome.
shock, but in a very pleasant shock. Like,
That's really cool. Guys, would you say, I'm especially talking to Tommy on Utsab on that, guys, would you say that Fulbright has changed you?
yes, I would say
I
yes.
think
I'm waiting for Tommy.
I would agree as well. Yeah.
I do agree too.
Yeah, I would agree as well because now that I'm back home, I've been back home now, and today it was the first time I kind of went outside into a restaurant, and still because of the virus, there are measures and everything, and there are not so many people, but and I've been sitting with my friends and talking, and my friends have been here for the whole year and everything, and I realize, that I suddenly have different perspectives. It's not just they've been stuck here, and I've been thinking, of people I met like in Nico. I've been thinking about France. I've been thinking about Minnesota the whole time. I've been thinking about India because I met you of course, and all the other people from in Oregon, and suddenly you kind of see the world as such so much smaller place. It's not just your city that matters. Suddenly the whole world that really matters because you've been in Minnesota, you've been to New York City, you talk to people from Venezuela like Joanna, our colleague, and actually kind of our best friend at St. Thomas, and suddenly you have kind of all these different perspectives, and I didn't have them before, and it helps you to see the world in a completely different way and in a much more positive way. And it also kind of scares you because when you watch the news and you hear all these devastating stories, maybe now with Norman, of course, um, and then you are you feel kind of you're affected, even though you're not affected, but because you know people from there, it's so different now. Yeah.
And therefore, Tommy, would you say that something that surprised you in a positive way in the US and that you will bring back with you would be this kind of melting pot thing or the vastness
Definitely.
of the culture? Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
So one thing maybe I will bring back home is a specific memory. It was in April. Um, I've been spending 6 months complaining about the weather here. I really did. And how bad it was in Minnesota and how cold I was and why did I choose this place in the world? Oh my God, what's happening to me? And then we had something really worse happening in the world. And for some weeks, I was totally in a kind of dormant mode, not going out. And someday in the beginning of April, I opened my windows and I saw that the whole place was covered with snow again. Like it was almost, I think, the middle of April or something like that. And that's not something you find in Europe. And as you guys all know, I'm a music nerd. I spend my time listening to old stuff. And there's this singer from Minneapolis, Prince, of course. He wrote a song called Sometimes It Snows in April. And I opened the window and I just saw that and I told myself, sometimes it snows in April. And it was one of those moments of just evidence. And I went out and I spent the day outside just taking pictures and enjoying what I couldn't enjoy a few months back. And I think that's what I'm going to bring back with me as well.
That's amazing.
Really awesome. Yeah.
So that was really an awesome talk with you guys. It's time to wrap up the show. So thank you so much, Utsab. You can come back anytime. You've been a top guest.
My pleasure. It's my pleasure. Totally my pleasure. It's so amazing to be amongst you guys. Thank you so much for having me.